Welcome back to the Digital Handshake podcast. I'm your host, Scott Jorgensen, and I'm pleased to be joined by plastic surgeon, Dr. Rachel Ford. Dr. Ford, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Fantastic. Yeah, I've been looking forward to this podcast for some time. I understand that we have a mutual friend that I believe you trained with, Dr. Chidester or Chidester.
Yes. He was my co-resident, so I have known him for a long time. And yeah, he's a great guy.
Well, first question, did he learn his dance moves from you in residency, or was that self-taught?
I wish I could take credit for that, but no, he had those moves long before I knew him. It is kind of funny because I feel like we're like two ends of the spectrum. Like I was so reluctant to get into social media kind of from the jump, whereas he's the exact opposite. So it's kind of funny.
Yeah, he's definitely been very successful in growing his following over social media, and we'll talk a little bit about that. I notice an accent there. I believe you're from the South. Introduce yourself to our audience. Love to get to know Dr. Ford.
So I'm born and raised in Louisville, Kentucky. Most of my family still lives there. I actually went to grad school in DC and then ended up going to medical school after that. And then still in Kentucky there, and then matched out to residency in Loma Linda here in California. And then after that, I stayed here in the practice that I'm now one of the co-owners. And I've been here for almost 9 years since I finished residency.
Well, I'm originally from Southern California, grew up there in Orange County. So coming from Kentucky to Southern California, I imagine you at times feel like a little bit of a fish out of water. Is there anything in particular that like in California is like totally different than say in Kentucky? Anything that sticks out?
Yeah, I just brought my daughter to Kentucky for the first time, and chasing lightning bugs with her was like recreating my childhood. But I did not know so many of y'all have never seen lightning bugs in real life.
Yes.
Tragic.
Yeah, that's definitely something we don't experience growing up there in California. Well, let's dive in. How long have you been practicing as a plastic surgeon now? And, share with us a little bit about your practice, in particular, sort of what we'll call your go-to procedures that you've become well-known in the Temecula-Murrieta area there in California.
So I mainly do aesthetic breast and body surgery, a lot of kind of revisional breast surgeries. I do tend to use a lot of mesh now. So that's kind of my go-to procedures, I'd say.
Beyond sort of the breast and body work, are you doing, any facial aesthetics or, facial surgery?
A little bit, but mostly I'm just so busy with the breast and body, and it's kind of what I love to do. So that actually takes up the majority of my time.
Yeah. Well, share with me a little bit about, marketing. We had talked about Dr. Chidester and about sort of social media and how he's really gravitated towards that and has built a very successful practice there in Utah. Share with me a little bit about what you're doing there in California to stand out and differentiate yourself from, there's a myriad of plastic surgeons that a patient could go to, that you've seen successful with your practice.
Yes, I certainly think it's a necessity nowadays. Certainly before, just generally my personality, I tend to be a little bit more introverted and would love to be behind the scenes, but that's just not so much of an option anymore. So I have kind of over the years adopted more and more of, putting myself out there on social media. And I do think it's beneficial for patients. I think that getting them to see sort of a more personal side or just get to know you before, like you said, there's so many plastic surgeons in Southern California. So to see what kind of sets me apart or my vibes, just how I approach certain things is certainly helpful to kind of stand out from the crowd. So I think just kind of more organically brand awareness and then just kind of getting my face and personality out there has been helpful.
Excellent. Patients today are, I think much different than say 10, 20 years ago when I got into plastic surgery and into the industry. What are you seeing in your practice? In particular, women, I imagine you're doing a lot of breast and body work, a lot of mommy makeovers, things of that sort. In particular, these women seeking plastic surgery treatments, what are you finding as like most concerning for them, or sort of what's top of mind?
It's social media, I think, has kind of benefited plastic surgery in general, but also hurt it in some ways. I think it's great for education, especially when we have people that, this is what we do and what we're kind of experts in. On the flip side, there's a lot of misinformation out there and a lot of, blatantly incorrect information. So kind of having patients filter through that can be difficult. Education, just even when they come in for the consult, kind of talking about what they're seeing online is something that we haven't really had to deal with in the past. So it's kind of a new field. So the more people that we have out there putting good information is certainly helpful, but then it's also social media can be a little bit harder in the sense of patients comparing themselves to other people and sometimes having unrealistic expectations. So certainly all those things kind of need to be addressed, whereas before it wasn't as much of an issue.
And I'd say the other thing that I'm finding, and you tell me if you feel differently, is the plastic surgeons themselves are definitely beginning to push the envelope in terms of, what they're saying, how they're characterizing or generalizing what, plastic surgeons think or feel, for that standpoint. And in fact, I want you to react to a social media clip that was just recently posted. And I came across this as part of my feed. And this is a plastic surgeon, Dr. Terry Dubois, who's very well known. He's one of the surgeons on Botched. And, he's, frequently in the media. But he said something that made me sort of like stop. And I really wanted to get your reaction to it because, candidly, I've never heard this perspective before. And I'd like to get your vantage point on his clip.
Sure.
The problem with plastic surgery is, and I'll tell you how you can tell, but the problem with plastic surgery is plastic surgeons don't really care, by and large. And I'm not really putting down plastic surgeons. Maybe I am a little bit. Plastic surgeons are mostly concerned about filling their operative schedule. We have very expensive offices with big overheads. We want to lead these plastic surgery lifestyles. And most plastic surgeons just want to operate on you. Okay, because that's what we like to do. We love to operate. We like to make money. We want to get better at it because it's a 10,000 hours thing. And they spend very little time evaluating the patient for whether they're actually a good or bad candidate.
What do you think? Do you share his opinion?
Not at all. At least not for myself personally. I think I just feel like I have almost the exact opposite perspective. For me, and my patients, when I have, for example, a breast consultation, it can take an hour. I mean, there's so much education and discussing potential options and what may or may not be right for that patient. I wish I could do it faster, but I can't, to be comfortable with what we're planning to do. I think beauty is subjective, but surgical planning is not, in my opinion. It's very analytical, planning every part of, that's why I like breast surgery. I find it to be a little bit more complicated than what people think. And so even after surgery, I'm seeing my patients a lot. I see them myself. I, at least at this point, don't have anybody else following them. I want to see them myself. If I put implants in someone once they're healed, I then want to see them once a year just to see how they're doing. When we get to their 5-year mark, I do the ultrasound for imaging of their implants. So I'm very involved. A lot of people are surprised if they have gone to other surgeons and had surgeries in the past. Sometimes they tell me, oh, I only saw my surgeon one time. And I'm like, that's crazy to me. Right. I was like, honey, you'll get tired of seeing me. Like, I'm in it for the long haul. I really want to make sure that the surgery I did is healing well and that they're happy and doing well.
It's funny. Plastic surgery for the most part on the aesthetic side is retail medicine. And, it's fee for service, out of pocket type care. For the most part, patients aren't sick when they're coming to see you, right? They're looking for some type of a beauty or aesthetic transformation, right? But with that said is at the end of the day, you are a doctor, a physician first. And I think at times that gets lost in this world of digital marketing and social media. And I think plastic surgeons get at times painted with this negative brush of being, it's all about making money. It's all about the flash and the cash of, driving a Lamborghini or these big homes that you see on, Real Housewives of Beverly Hills or what have you, where plastic surgeons at times are featured. And it's kind of unfortunate. And, this clip in particular, I found, just kind of startling and a bit shocking. And that's why I really wanted to get your perspective on things. And again, kind of pulling a little bit on that string of social media in the context of plastic surgery. And I wanted to find out from you, where in particular do you think is the safe spot, the sweet spot of that intersection of social media and plastic surgery?
I think it's difficult, and sometimes I also think it's changing. In the past with social media, it was a great place to not only talk about education, but also show, for example, our before and after pictures. Now it's very difficult to do that because for breast and body surgery, even when I blur, for example, on the breast surgery, I'm forever like in Instagram jail and Facebook jail and wherever getting in trouble because of posting those. So it's hard because, I'm trying to talk about the cases, in those videos, and I'm still getting in trouble. And, there's more restrictions as we go. But plastic surgeons are the ones that have the most knowledge. So it's a little hard battling that. Certainly I wouldn't want to see someone who doesn't have the qualifications, posting whatever pictures. But if you do, then it's like, why can't I post that? So yeah, it's getting a little bit frustrating, I think, for me at least.
Yeah, the before and after photography and the shadow banning, is definitely a slippery slope, and you got to be extremely careful. One of the things that I've seen other plastic surgeons do quite successfully, that has really been sort of a game changer in attracting new patients, is this concept of patient journey vignettes, where you're able to show sort of it's almost like a mini little show where you can experience from the patient considering, say, a breast augmentation to finally meeting with you, the sort of the interplay between you and the patient and the consultation, and then actually seeing them walk into the OR and, all of that, and then sort of the post-operative care experience. And so it's like you can kind of see the journey from A to Z. And I think that is another way to showcase, sort of that happy, transformative experience with patients. So I want to switch gears a little bit as we sort of wrap up here. I wanted to kind of play a little bit of a game and do kind of like a what's hot, what's not in sort of plastic surgery. So first question is Preservé, right? Seems to be a very hot topic right now in the breast implant space. Are you a fan? Have you began offering it to your patients? Or is it sort of a niche within a niche?
A niche within a niche, I think.
Okay.
For me, I think it has to be the exact right patient, but I'm not totally sold on it yet. So we'll see.
Okay. Fair enough. What about regenerative aesthetics? That seems to be another sort of hot topic, is this concept of exomes and peptides and, go down the list of the different things that are out there. What's your perspective on it? You a believer, or do you think it's a passing fad?
I'm a believer, but I just want to see a lot more data.
Yeah.
I think there's certainly the potential for some of those things to be helpful. For most of them, I don't think the data is there yet. And I want to see that before adopting something or, multiple things into the practice. I think it's kind of gets overwhelming right now, and people getting things off of the gray market or whatever that is. So, I just really like to see good data before going that path. I think it'll be interesting to see where it goes, and it potentially could get there.
Yeah, I agree. So to wrap up, here's my final question for you. You've probably been at like a dinner table conversation or what have you, and someone says, "Oh, you look like so-and-so, like a celebrity." So who have you gotten recently where someone says that sort of, who's your celebrity doppelganger?
I haven't heard this recently.
Okay.
Probably just because I'm getting older. But in the past, people would say like Anna Kendrick.
Yeah. No. I see that. Yeah. Spot on. Yeah, absolutely.
That's the only one that I can think of. Like
That's a
off
good
the
one
top of my
too.
head.
So yeah, that's a
Yeah.
compliment for sure.
Yeah, I'll take it for sure.
Well, that's awesome. Well, first off, I want to say thank you, Dr. Ford, for being on the Digital Handshake. I want to say thank you to our sponsors, Media PSC, for making this podcast available to all of you. And again, we want to thank our audience for joining us here, and we look forward to our next episode.
Thank you so much for having me.